In political science, we often need to translate broad concepts into specific, observable measures. In this video, I discuss the process of conceptualization and measurement, then introduce two ways we evaluate how well a measure captures a concept: validity and reliability. Conceptualization is how we define an idea, what the meaning of a concept is. For example, how do you define democracy? Some people focus on political rights, but others may see democracy as guaranteeing economic prosperity, social outcomes, or rule of law. It is often helpful to think about the dimensions or different elements of your definition. For example, Dahl defines democracy in two dimensions: participation and contestation. The Varieties of Democracy dataset provides several options to choose from that represent different conceptualizations of what democracy is. The Polyarchy score combines procedural and rights-based definitions of democracy, while the Deliberative Democracy Index focuses more on societal engagement and consultation. When we try to measure a concept, we call this process operationalization. Measurement, or operationalization, usually involves identifying specific observable implications or indicators of that concept. For example, we could measure a level of democracy based on elections, constitutional protections of rights, arrests of protesters. There are many possible ways. What's important is that you are specific about what you mean. You also need to think through the implications of your measures. Are you capturing a full concept or just part of it? And if you're only talking about part of a concept, are you going to combine different indicators together? For example, it's possible to think of democracy as a categorical variable. A country is free or not free, as Freedom House defines it. You could also think of it as a continuous variable. A country gets a number between 0 and 1 based on how democratic it is. Sometimes you want to draw a clear distinction between democracy and dictatorship, so using categories would be a good idea. But sometimes countries don't really fit clearly into a category. In those situations, you might want to use a continuous scale to talk about a country being more or less democratic. This gets at the idea of how we can tell whether our measures are good or not. There are two main criteria we use to make this evaluation: validity and reliability. Validity is used in many ways in political science. Here, what I am talking about is called construct validity, and you can think of it as being equivalent to accuracy. Specifically, how well does a measure capture a concept? For example, if I want to talk about the quality of democracy, using a two-category measure is probably not going to work well. That would not be very valid. Similarly, if you are interested in just talking about political rights, instead of using a measure of overall democracy, you might want to just use a measure that focuses on political rights, not things like rule of law. So while validity is about the accuracy of your measurement, reliability is whether it is possible to reproduce or not. If somebody else were to try and make the same measurement, for example, would they get the same results? We try to ensure reliability by adding specific methods into our data collection. For example, you could have different people check your data or make the same calculation based on historical events. Evaluating construct validity is harder though, but there are still ways to check. For example, if you're gathering historical data, do the sources of that information have incentives to overestimate progress? If you're gathering survey or interview data, what incentives do respondents have to lie? What's most important is that you think through whether any bias is systematic. In other words, does it always skew the data in one direction, or is bias random? Random bias isn't great. It limits the reliability of your data. But systemic bias means that your data lack construct validity. You're not really measuring what you say you are. So to summarize again, conceptualization is defining your ideas and your concepts. Operationalization is translating those broad concepts into specific measures. We evaluate the quality of this process by looking at its validity, how accurate we think our measures are, and reliability, whether those measures are reproducible.